personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds, and this is the Data Diva Talks Privacy Podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, a dear friend. I've known him forever, ever. John Sudduth. He is the Chief Information Officer at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. Hello, John.
Hey, Debbie. Good to see you.
It's great. I haven't seen you since, the pandemic started, and, we've known each other so long. We have kind of a constellation of mutual friends, and we kind of talk through a lot of times, but I thought it'd be great to have you on the show. You're someone, as I said, we've known each other for a super long time. We met back in the 90s when I was doing consulting work with law firms on digital transformation stuff. And you just really stood out to me. I've been so excited about all the cool things that you've done in your career because, first of all, you're just a very down-to-earth, funny, humorous person. You have a very level business head on your shoulders. You seem unflappable. I don't think any situation where I've ever, seen you in, you've been able to definitely handle yourself. And, it definitely shows in kind of your leadership and the things that you're doing in Chicago.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we go back a pretty good ways. So, definitely happy to be here. Honored to participate in the podcast.
Yeah. I thought you'd be a perfect person to talk to. And I don't even know what podcast I was on. I was on one. I said, oh my God, I need to talk to my friend John about this stuff. So I think people who work in municipalities, I think you have special challenges that maybe the private sector don't even think about, right? For me, I think it's part of that is everyone is your customer, right? So it's not like Apple or whatever. Like, okay, everyone who buys this is our customer. It's like, okay, everyone in Chicago that has water, that wants water, right, which is everyone, is your customer. So I think, I would love to hear your thoughts about, first of all, for anyone who doesn't know, this is really awesome. Talk about kind of your trajectory of your career in kind of the cyber or IT space. And then I would love for you to talk a little bit about kind of the things that you see happening for municipalities around, cybersecurity and privacy.
Absolutely. So my career goes over a pretty lengthy time frame as the IT world goes. I actually started in help desk support once upon a time. So I'm not the traditional. I like to say I'm not the traditional CIO. I literally started by installing components to computers. And from there, I went into networking, then did some database administration work, a little bit of software development, actually building networks and small applications, into management. So once I got to management, I was a bit of a hybrid. So leadership and still doing technical work. And probably about 10, 12 years ago, I pulled my fingers off the keyboard because I was struggling to kind of straddle that line between wanting to do the technology and wanting to get more into technology and business alignment. So I made the decision that I was, reluctantly pulling my fingers off the keyboard and focusing on leadership, business transformation through IT and that type of thing. So pretty lengthy career in IT. I've been in almost 30 years now, so I'm giving away my age, and not to give away yours, but
yeah, I know you most of that time.
So it's been a pretty good career, honestly. I've kind of seen technologies come and go. And probably over the last I've been around security pretty much that entire time, although it's kind of morphed into something completely different, over around the last 12 to 15 years. But I've really gone hard and heavy with information privacy, data privacy, information security for about the last 7 years, to the point where I currently hold a multitude of security related certifications. So that's kind of my career in a nutshell.
That's really cool. I noticed the announcements that you make, and I see you speaking on stage or different things. I keep up with you and what you're doing. And I noticed a few years ago that you were dipping your toe into privacy. And I would love to know sort of what was the impetus for that with you.
Well, I think privacy is a key component to technology, right? So part of our job as technology professionals is to collect, house, and protect data. And data pretty much drives everything that we do. It's not just technology anymore, but your data is being tracked with you buy a candy bar on your credit card or any of those rewards programs. That's data collection. So I started to dig a little deeper into privacy to get a better understanding of it. I mean, while it's always been there, we didn't think enough about it. I would say back pre-2000, right? We were just putting data out there,
right?
Just putting things out there. And what happened? The bad things started to happen, right? The data leaks and the exploitation of data, the holding data hostage, manipulation. And then we started to say, oh, wait a minute, we need to protect this stuff. So I've kind of become an evangelist like yourself with putting privacy first and making sure that people understand that we have all this data and that it needs to be protected. So that's constantly what I'm pushing now throughout the utility space and actually throughout the IT space in general.
Yeah, wow, that's great to hear. I knew you're just a smart cookie anyway, so I knew that you would get that relation. And my genesis in technology was kind of database administration, so that was kind of my first love in data. And I always like to see data flows and things that happen. And obviously, we see data flows that aren't great. Especially as people are using it. So one thing I would love to talk about, and I'm sure you're the perfect person to talk to this, which is in the past, information security, in my view, was thought as you have a castle and you're protecting the castle, okay, and everything, the walls and everything like that, but we're saying that the data is not always in the castle and the threat is not always outside of the castle. So talk to me a little bit about that kind of mind shift or that change in sort of IT and privacy.
Oh, wow. That's really ironic, Debbie, because that's the exact analogy that I've used in several presentations. It's almost like you've seen them, but I know that you haven't. But you're absolutely right. That traditional mindset was that, there's our data is in this castle. I liken them to crown jewels and a castle. And then you have this castle with the wall and then you have the mall and then, all of that protection. So that was the traditional way of kind of protecting data, using that analogy in that there are firewalls, there are, intrusion detection devices and all the things that protect your crown jewels. But what's happened, and this has really exploded due to COVID, is that people have taken those crown jewels and made them mobile, right? They're storing them on laptops now, they're storing it on phones and tablets and that. So the threat doesn't have to break through this wall and this mall to get to your crown jewels because your crown jewels are being taken out with your user population. So what's happened is that we've had to pivot and adjust to protecting those endpoints. We call it endpoint protection. So we have to build that same methodology around each device as it goes out. And what we've learned, and this has been a hard lesson, is that you can put all the technology in the world around your assets, data being an asset. But if the mindset of the person who has that asset is not right, bad actors are going to get to it, right? No matter what. So I always, inform people when I'm speaking about data privacy, when I'm speaking about cybersecurity, is that you have to change the mindset of your data stewards, your people who are actually holding that data, who have certain controls over that data, to make sure that they understand that the threats are out there, the threats are imminent, and that you empower them with a mindset of protecting that data when that they have the control over.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that you're thinking about we have like-minded ways to think about this problem. One thing I would love to talk to you about, I'm sure you know tons about, and this is shadow IT. Okay. So in the old days, shadow IT has always been a problem with people trying to do their own technology and stuff like that, and sort of not going along the path of what the organization wants to do. But shadow IT, I think now creates like a much higher risk to organizations, especially because before it used to be like, oh, you have to go through this purchase process and someone had to install this application on your drive. Now you have people just creating accounts in the cloud and throwing stuff in the cloud, and then they leave the organization and people are like, oh, our data got deleted. I was like, oh, because Jasper left the company and he, the stuff is on his account and all this stuff. So talk to me about kind of the threat of shadow IT and sort of how it is kind of exponentially changed because of the cloud.
Absolutely. So I think that there were several drivers that pushed what we traditionally knew as shadow IT into this whole new realm. And you hit on one of those, which is the cloud. That was a big driver. But the other driver that I talk about that I don't hear a lot of other people talking about is what I call the consumerization of IT, right? And the analogy or the example that I use is that when you go buy a device from Apple, whether it be a phone or a tablet or a watch or what have you, and next time you buy one, just notice, or if you're an Apple consumer, that there are no instructions that come with that device, right? Back in the day, we would get a device and you had a whole book with an index that told you how to configure that device, how to use that device, and everything about it. But what happened with the consumerization of technology is that end users started to feel very empowered that, okay, you know what? I set up my phone. I can set up an account in the cloud and I can become my own, IT person. I don't need IT anymore. And what I've seen is that actually evolved into vendors giving the misconception to end users within an organization that you don't need IT, right? All you need to do is sign up with us, and then we will configure everything. And your IT department may not even need to know about this. And I can't tell you how many of those installations that I've had to clean up, right? And it always comes back to, well, the vendor said that we didn't really need IT, so we didn't bring this through the normal process. And that's kind of what it's really evolved into. And I think that the cloud and the consumerization of technology has really pushed that to a point to where it is right now.
Yeah, two things. Two things I want to talk to you about. I wrote myself a note so I don't forget. So, one, I want you to expound a bit on the people part of the IT or cyber problem, and then the second part is in terms of like administration and how you deal with kind of cyber threats. I feel like the threats are exponentially more complex, and I don't think is something where you can just throw bodies at the problem. So it's a two-part question. One is about people, and one is about sort of how we face these exponential threats in the future.
So I'll start with the second part first about facing the threats. The first part really is understanding, right? You can't protect what you don't know. So you have to identify the assets within your organization that you're looking to protect. And then from that point, you figure out what the best tools, what the best methodologies will be to protect those assets. So it's really about understanding. And then from that point, you have to what I call keep your ear to the street as to what's happening out there. So that may mean, listening to various podcasts. It may mean joining various groups to consume information. It may be listening to webinars, but whatever, find some outlets where you can consume information and get a better understanding of what's happening. Because if you put those two things together, right, we've protected our assets, and then we can look at the emerging threats that are happening. You can actually go back and adjust as needed. And that's something in the utility space that we constantly have to do, because we're directly battling state-sponsored bad actors in a lot of cases. So that's the second part to your question. The first part is the people, right? And with the people, it really goes to training and making sure that they have a good understanding of how to protect their information and how they can be utilized in order to gain access to that information and the level of threat that they may be to an organization. One thing that we really harp on is mandatory cybersecurity training, cyber awareness training, to the point where we do internal phishing campaigns to make sure that our people understand that these are the things that may be coming through. We actually go beyond that to try and give our end users some life skills around cybersecurity. So, outside of what we're doing at our organization, we say these are some of the things that you may see coming through your personal email, right? It's tax season. So the bad actors are out there trying to get your information to file fraudulent tax returns. And, so I think by kind of putting those things together, the people and the protection of the asset, you have a better chance of combating these threats, because the threats are there. Some of the threats are going to get through. You're going to have to deal with them, but you want to protect as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, excellent. What concerns you? What's on the horizon that concerns you the most in kind of privacy? Either in your role or personally. What are you looking at, like thinking, I don't like this?
I'm not a big fan of the facial recognition. That's something that worries me a little, just from a personal perspective. Although I do use it on my phone, but I just feel like I can see kind of things on the horizon around targeted marketing based off of that, hitting certain demographics and other things that could be used, bad things that could happen or could be a result of collecting facial recognition data. So that's the one thing around privacy that does concern me right now.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and that's something I talk about a lot. I actually the phone. I used to have a phone that had Face ID, and I traded it to someone. It was a higher phone. I traded it to someone with a older phone that didn't have it.
Yeah,
because I'm like, I don't really like this. I don't really like this. And a lot of it is what we're seeing is companies can misuse and abuse data, right, for different purposes. And right now, we don't have strong enough regulations in the US, especially around kind of that third party data risk?
Mhm.
What are you using it for? Did people agree to this? So that's definitely a challenge that we definitely see. I would love to, actually have a question and a comment. So you are extraordinarily gifted in the way that you communicate with people, and you've always been that way as long as I've known you. And
Well, thank you
so,
for that, first and foremost. I appreciate
uh,
that.
the thing that you do that is so amazing is that you don't talk down to people about IT stuff. So you don't, I've never seen you, do the acronym soup thing with anyone. You explain things in very simple terms. So it helps you to be able to talk with people at all levels, in a way that they can understand without, you bring them into the conversation and not shut them out. So just give me a little bit, some executive advice for people who are looking to kind of have that type of communication skill. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, communication really bridges a gap, right? I mean, no one is you can't just hop into an industry and start doing acronym soup as you dubbed it. And what I try and make sure that I do is to catch myself if I start to do that. Now, when I'm talking to someone, if I'm talking to a completely technical audience, we will geek out in a heartbeat, and I have no problem with that
Right.
because I understand the audience that I'm speaking to. But I try and make sure that if I'm speaking to a general audience, that I don't go into geek speak, and I try and make sure that I understand that audience. Also, I think that as communicators, not even just executives, but just communicators in general, we just have to be conscious that all of us have a connection as a human, right? And we need to make sure, or we need to stay conscious that as we're relaying information, that people are actually consuming that information. So it means putting something out there, seeing a reaction, and making sure that you're getting a response from it. And I think that that's the one takeaway that I would give anyone around communication is, speak, listen, and then react, right? But that listening part is key. You have to be able to listen, which is to consuming the information, and then act off it. So don't try and overtalk anyone, or don't try and start using acronyms to make yourself seem smarter than anyone, but just connect on a human level, and just converse and communicate on that human level.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Right. So listening means actually listening to the person and not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Exactly right. You hit the nail right on the head, right? Process the information, understand what they're saying, because a lot of times you can get something key out of that you otherwise would not have gotten if you're trying to talk over someone, or if you're thinking of what you're going to say next.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So you've been in private sector, you've been in public sector. I would love your thoughts about kind of the differences there in terms of kind of cybersecurity and your roles. What are your thoughts about that?
Mhm. So the notion, and I've actually fielded this question a couple of times, and the response that I typically give is that in private sector, our notion was to fail fast. So let's try this. Let's get it out there. Let's get it implemented. If it's not going to work, let's figure that out fast to figure out what we're going to do next. Right? Government, you get one shot. so and that was a tough lesson for me, honestly. But being frank, that was a very tough lesson, in that you have to do deep due diligence, because you whatever solution that you select, you're essentially married to it for 5 years. You can't take the fast, fail fast mentality. So that has really, believe it or not, helped me a lot to evolve my thinking around technology implementation. So now I take the approach of combining those two things together. So while we need to understand the technologies that are out there and understand that they're evolving really quickly, because again, in private sector we have the rule: if you can't get it implemented in 6 months, don't do it. But in government, it is darn impossible to get something implemented in 6 months. So you have to continuously do due diligence, and you have to make sure that you're selecting the right product because, like I said, you're going to be married to it for 5 years. So those are the two, compare and contrast. And another thing about government is that there are processes. Some people call it red tape, but there are processes in place that you have to do something, you execute, and then you have to wait sometimes a pretty lengthy time before you can actually move on to the next step. Where in private sector, sometimes you can do things in parallel.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. One thing that I would love your thoughts on, and this is kind of privacy enhancing tech. So I think of this in two different ways. One is technology that's created, their sole purpose is to handle privacy, right? And then what we're seeing is, as some companies, let's say you already have tools that you're using, and as they're updated, they're saying, okay, we know that you have privacy concerns. We created this feature to sort of help you manage that. What are you seeing in terms of either stuff you're implementing or things that you're looking at that are coming to you that touch on privacy?
Well, I think thankfully most companies are aware now that privacy is a concern. So, I'm seeing a lot more privacy statements built into contracts. I'm seeing, things like agreed upon data purges at certain points, actually relinquishing data upon termination in contracts and those types of things. So I'm a lot more enthusiastic around privacy as it relates to companies housing data now than I was, let's say, even 5 years ago. So I think that there's a lot of awareness around privacy. I mean, we see it, in the media and on various news outlets, probably multiple times per day. So I think that that's really driven companies to think about privacy first. And I think that's driven companies that are consuming those services and those products to ask good questions around privacy. So how are you protecting our data? And that's something that I put in place at the organization that I'm at right now. We have it's what I think we're up to about 3.5 pages of various questions, places where they have to attest as to how they're securing data, and various ways that we're asking those privacy questions. And I think that that's the case in a lot of organizations right now.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I think it's only going to increase, especially as we see these regulations tighten up around the world, or especially around kind of third party risk, especially. So,
Mm-hmm.
even though, I see people, even though they're not in Europe or they not be doing things in Europe, they're seeing kind of a European flavor in those questionnaires about, what is the purpose that you have for this data?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing this data retention? Where it wasn't, companies would keep data forever, if they weren't told to do otherwise, right? So,
Right.
For me, I'm glad because I hate that sort of end of life thing. Like nobody, everyone wants to be hot on a product when it first comes out, right? But when it's
Mm-hmm.
like when the age is out, no one wants to be, like a hot potato. Nobody wants to touch that. It's like there's no glory in the end of the whole thing. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely agree. Again, to your point, it's good to see people aware of that. So, that bright shiny object is always attractive, right? But we have to keep our eyes on that as it starts to age out and not be as shiny, and understand that this data, that we put out there in the beginning is going to be just as valuable as when that system becomes end of life. So we have to protect it throughout the entire life cycle.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I think is really tough that municipalities do, that I think private companies don't have to think about as much, and that is sort of when everyone is your customer, it makes your job that much more difficult, right? So if you have technologies, for example, that were developed for the private sector, and then when they try to implement it in the public sector, there may be some gaps there that people aren't thinking about. Can you talk a little bit about kind of, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. Can
Yeah,
you talk about
absolutely.
those challenges?
Yeah, I'll talk specifically about in that arena, the challenges with IoT right now, Internet of Things. We at utilities, there's a lot of data that in some cases are still manually collected. And as IoT has been introduced, various sensors and various data collection mechanisms, that industry has really exploded. And it's exploded without any regulations around it. And to your point, there are companies out there that are building these widgets that they're constantly saying, "This is a great widget. This is life changing for your utility," and this and that. And some utilities buy into it, and then they try and integrate it, and they find that it doesn't integrate with some of their legacy systems, or it doesn't collect the data in a manner that's useful to them for their reporting needs, and that. So that's something that we're constantly seeing, and that's actually something that I'm working with a group of utilities across the U.S. to try and get various standards in place, or at least a guideline in place for vendors to operate against as they're building these devices, so that not only will it work, at one utility, but it'll work across the entire industry. And that's really where that void is, right? So in public sector, in a lot of cases, things have standardized, or what I would call corporate IP. Things have standardized across the board. So you go buy this widget, is more than likely going to integrate into your environment. However, on the public sector side, particularly in utilities, that may not be the case, because the technology is so vastly different from organization to organization. So that's something that's going to be imperative to get in place within the utility industry, probably over the next few years, because we're seeing these various infrastructures come to end of life. Some of them have been around for 20 and 30 years in some cases. And the threat is out there, because the bad actors are coming at it like gangbusters. I mean, the perfect example is Colonial Pipeline. I was a critical infrastructure that got breached. So, I would say that getting certain standards in place, and having an understanding that your widget needs to integrate with various systems, and this is from a vendor perspective, is absolutely paramount when your customer base are public utilities.
That's so cool that you're working on that. It's such a vital thing. I work on IoT as well, devices with actually with companies that are pitching to municipalities. So yeah, there are definitely some things there, some gaps there you have to think about. To me, I think of an IoT device as a computer without a screen. Basically. So I think people think, oh, it's not doing anything. You don't know what it's doing exactly. So I think, like you're saying, a lot of these, especially municipalities, you have these systems that weren't, they were never commercial, right? They were always, probably purpose built for municipalities. And then now you have these things on the market, internet connected, and you're trying to build it into your system. And I can see how that would be very challenging.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant challenge in the industry right now.
Yeah. With smart meter, because people think, oh, I got this smart meter. I'm gonna go to Amazon and buy this thing and plug it in. And you may not know even what it's doing exactly. Or what you're agreeing to.
or you may not even know enough to change the default password, right?
Right.
So you get it, you plug it in, and now someone
Yeah.
has access to directly to that device.
Yeah. One other thing that concerns me about IoT is that, as computing becomes more sophisticated, the devices will talk to each other and they'll talk to each other about you. So I think people don't understand kind of the power of these devices, the technology is going into them and sort of how to use them or how to limit their use. Maybe, if a device has 10 things that it does, maybe you only need, 5 of those things. And then kind of the legal issues around what it's doing, a lot of times I feel like organizations end up holding the bag on that. Where they implement something and say, okay, well, it's doing something that's illegal in your state or something, so it's an issue. What are your thoughts?
No, you're absolutely right. And this is something that I'm foreseeing come, actually, it's probably already here. But as we start talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, those concerns become multiplied, because what could ultimately happen and what ultimately will happen is that you're going to start to integrate now what we think of not so smart IoT devices, or those devices that are only designed to do 10 things. But when you put machine learning on top of that, and then AI on top of that machine learning, now you have a system that's pushing or having those 10 things done and making decisions, right? And this is sometimes can be without human intervention. So your point about it doing something that's not legal in a certain state without your knowing is quite plausible. And not knowing is not deniability, right? In the eyes of the law. So.
Exactly. Right. So, the things that concern me, well, one really interesting thing, and I did a video about this, is like devices that end up doing multiple things. So let's say a speaker is only, telling you things. Now it's recording information. Now it's, or something that has video on it or some sensor, that's a whole other thing. Something that's sensing you but not videotaping you. Because there are different laws about that. So it's different laws for video, different laws for audio, very few laws about sensors. So we're going to see a lot of that probably coming up in the future. So having these devices that maybe even with, update push to the internet now has all these capabilities that you didn't know about, that you didn't even know it had the capability to do, but now it has this new functionality. And I think some people think that's cool. And it's, in some ways it's not bad, but I think, to me, again, I think a lot of, whether it be individuals or even municipalities, they're going to be left holding the bag if these things are doing things that aren't aren't legal.
Mm-hmm. I mean, think about electric cars, right? Cars that do updates over the year, and this is where it's going to hit individuals and have a significant impact. But let's do a what if, right? What if a bad package came across the internet and hit? I won't name a brand, but let's say one particular brand of electric car, and it disables that car. So now you have this whole group of consumers who can't get to work, who can't, get to wherever they need to go per se, because they got a bad update from their car provider. And I liken this to, for those of us who've been around technology for a long time, there was a patch that came out in Windows NT4, and I hate to start bringing various companies into this, but this is the example that that I always have to use. And it disabled you had to shut down systems across the globe until another patch was put out by Microsoft in order to fix the bad patch that they had put out. So imagine if something like that happened to a high profile electronic car company, that could have a drastic impact on individuals. So you're absolutely right to have those concerns.
Yeah. And that's not far-fetched. That's not sci-fi. Like this can actually happen. Yeah.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Well, if it were the world according to John and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for privacy in the world? So whether it be regulation, technology, anything, people stuff.
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to flip it back to you to ask what are your thoughts on what I'm about to say.
Oh my goodness.
But I would say, here in the US, we need a consolidated privacy law. And the reason that I say that is because, we see laws coming out of California. We see privacy laws coming out of California, privacy laws coming out of Illinois, privacy laws coming out of Michigan. And as IT professionals, we enable businesses, right? And it's really difficult, at least in my opinion, to have to know what the various laws are throughout individual states. Like, okay, well, in Illinois, we have an all-party consent law when it comes down to recording audio. That's not the case in, I think, New York So I think that having something concise that goes across the entire country, like the UK did, would greatly benefit us. But I would like to know your thoughts on that as a privacy professional.
Oh my goodness, look at you. Yeah, I agree. I think we need to get out of the idea that the people stay in one place and they compute in one place. And, the way it's going about at the state level is kind of provincial. So as we live near the Indiana border, like it's buck wild in Indiana. You can do all types of stuff in Indiana that you can't do in Illinois, and so I think it just creates more confusion for businesses and it makes it hard for them to know how to implement their products, especially as you're doing kind of emerging technology. So it just gets that much more complicated. So I think you're right. I think instead of fighting about the stuff that we don't agree about, let's come to some basic understanding of what we do agree about. So to me, at a federal level, we should at least have one synchronized definition of what personal data is, So I end up doing work where I'm advising companies on kind of state by state things that they can do. And it's just crazy from state by state, what the different laws and different challenges that people have to face when they have products and services that they're putting out. So I think having more of a approach where we can, stop fighting about the things that we don't agree about, like, the prior right of action or preemption, and just say, okay, as a country, we agree on these, personal data means these 5 things, I think that would greatly help organizations and, help consumers because, most consumers can't navigate this as well. It's really hard to know what their rights are even.
No, great point. Great point.
Fantastic. Look at you interviewing me. Very cool. Very cool. Well, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm happy that you were on the show. I think you gave some really great insight. I love to chat with you too about some of this IoT stuff because that's, in my wheelhouse as well. So it'd be fun to talk about that.
No, absolutely. Anytime, just let me know. We'll get scheduled synced and we'll make it happen.
Perfect. Well, it's so great to have you on the show, and I thank you so much. And I know the listeners really love it.
Okay, I'm ecstatic to be a part of the show. I congratulate you on your success, and wish you continued success.
Well, thank you. That's so sweet, Sean. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Good to see you.
Cheers, bye.